We're into a new year. So I bring you Happy New Year for our beloved community. We're gathered together at the start of a new year as people of many ages, as people of many sexual orientations and gender orientations, as people of many races and ethnicities, as people of many theologies and religious backgrounds, woven together in our love for this community, with our hopes and dreams and prayers for the year before us, with our hearts and minds and spirits ready to be touched by the year before us, with our hands and time and talents ready to be offered in the year before us, we gather together with gratitude and love for those who have come before us, for those who stand here with us. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year. Come, let us be together. And now let us take some time to light the candles of community. You can light the candle for a joy or a concern, or simply to bring more light to our room together. Let us stand and body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice. This chalice flame burns for those who seek and defend the right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, so that each person may live according to conscience in a democratically elected society. The flame burns for the defenders of freedom, working against those who would impose their own religious beliefs on others through intimidation or legislation. May we tend this fire always, ever vigilant and courageous in the struggle for freedom and justice for all. Let us join together in our spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated. Our opening thought comes from Elaine Pagels in her work, Adam, Eve, and the Serpent, Sex and Politics in Early Christianity. She writes, I am not saying that religious ideas are nothing but a cover for political motives. Instead, I intend to show that religious insights and moral choices in actual experience coincide with practical ones. Our first song is A New World.
One seed is all it takes to grow a forest. One candle can light a dark room. One voice is enough, speaking words of love. Each moment becomes what we choose. Do you want a new world? A world that works for everyone? Open your heart and let it be. We can become the new world. Mother Earth beneath the sky. She's waiting for you and for me to be new. Our dreams light the path for us to walk on. Our songs help our spirits align. And each little child helps remind us why we not only might, we must thrive. For everyone, open your life and let it be. We can become the new world. Mother Earth beneath the sky, she's waiting for you and for me to be a new world. Just this thought, it has begun. But don't you wanna see a new world? Your Mother Earth beneath the gray sky, counting on you and me to be a new
Our first reading is from the book titled Jesus versus Caesar by Jörg Rieger, who's a professor at the Vanderbilt School of Divinity. Rieger writes, when we observe a tension between Jesus and Caesar, we acknowledge that a fundamental tension remains at the heart of Christianity. The tension is not between religion and atheism or secularism, nor is it between organized religion and personal spirituality, or between Christianity and other religions. The tension is located within the heart of Christianity itself, because it is a radical conflict between faith that is life-giving for all and faith that is damaging and destructive of people and the earth. This tension between life-giving and malignant forms of religion is also deeply rooted in the Jewish traditions. The Hebrew prophets were gravely concerned about established forms of religion that appear to be respectable but result in oppression. The prophet Isaiah hears the voice of God pronouncing judgment on malignant religion. You serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Life-giving religion, by contrast, loosens the bonds of injustice. Let us hear these words for our time of meditation. We have arrived here in this new year. We have crossed the boundary of time into the next year with all of its resolutions and plans and schedules ahead of us. Let us pause for this moment before we move boldly onward. Let us pause to hear the breathing of those around us, to feel their presence in this room, to know their presence in our lives. Let us pause to consider the trees, their branches stripped bare, their elegant architecture on display. Let us pause to feel the spirit of life and love that ties us to each other, that winds its way through our very bones and settles in our hearts. Before we continue to move forward, armed with resolutions that will shortly be forgotten in the day-to-day of living, let us notice what it is that remains every year, every day. What exists beyond schedules and months, beyond time. It welcomes us to life, not just at the start of the year, but every day. Our second reading comes from Sharon Delgado, one of my United Methodist minister colleagues, and her book titled Shaking the Gates of Hell. She writes, though there are powerful forces at work that threaten life, we need not fear. These destructive forces are not abstract and irreversible, but emerge from actual institutions that hold political, economic, and military power. We can meet these forces with courage, and if we are deeply grounded in faith, together as people of faith and conscience around the world, we can shake the gates of hell, resisting the horror of a barren, violent, and poisoned future, while developing new and viable alternatives to help build a peaceful, just, and sustainable world. My discourse this morning is titled, Making the Empire Great Again, and I'm exploring how it is that religion is sometimes used by political forces for the purposes of political forces, and I'm going to particularly be looking at the way Christianity was used in the Roman Empire, but also look at a few other examples as well. This is not something that is only the case with Christianity. Many different forms of religions, many different faith traditions have been used throughout history by different political forces for their purposes. It's important to start off by remembering that when we look at early Christianity, that not all followers of Jesus in the first couple of centuries after Jesus' death agreed about who he was or what he did and how people should live who followed him. There was a wide range of different views that the early Christians had in relation to who Jesus was and what he did. They had varying views about whether Jesus was human or divine or some combination of the two. They finally came to an agreement that Jesus was some combination of the two, but for centuries there was quite a bit of disagreement about that. There were the Gnostics who believed that Jesus really didn't have a material body, that Jesus really wasn't human like we were, but was simply a spiritual form. And then there were the Arians who believed that Jesus was divine, but subordinate to God, as what they called it, the Father, so that there was a subordination of Jesus to God, but Jesus was still somehow divine. And then finally, the early Christians came to an agreement that Jesus was both human and divine, and that Jesus was divine as fully as God the Father, in their words, was divine. They had also quite a few disagreements in the Jesus movement about whether it was primarily a Jewish movement or a Gentile movement. And so the early followers of Jesus had arguments about whether persons who followed Jesus should convert to Judaism. Should they have the same dietary rules and rituals and become a part of Judaism to become a follower of Jesus? And then there were others who believed that that was not necessary, to take on the dietary practices and rituals and other rituals of Judaism, that one could be a non-Jew and follow Jesus. But there was a lot of disagreement about that early on, about diet, rituals, and whether persons should convert to Judaism. They also had different views about the nature of good and evil in the world. The early followers of Jesus did. Some of the early followers of Jesus believed that there were two forces in the world. There was the force of goodness and the force of evil, and those two forces were in constant battle within the world. And there was a sect within Christianity called the Manichaeans, who believed in this view of two forces, evil versus good in the world. And then there were other followers of Jesus early on who believed that evil wasn't a force that was out there. Rather, evil was simply the absence of good. Evil was what happened when we turn our will and our love away from God to lower things in creation. And there were quite a few disagreements among the early followers of Christ about these views about good and evil. They also had different views about how they should relate to governing authorities. There was quite a bit of persecution that was going on in early Christianity by the Roman Empire, and there was a lot of disagreement about how early followers of Jesus should relate to the governing authorities, and also whether followers of Jesus could become soldiers within the Roman Empire. There was quite a bit of heated debate about that. And as most of you may know, most of the early Christians were actually pacifists. Most of the early Christians believed that it was against the nature of being a follower of Jesus to participate in any form of violence. But as time went on, and as Christianity became more and more a part of the larger culture and started to become less persecuted and eventually became accepted by the Roman Empire and then eventually became the official religion of the Roman Empire, that view about violence and the use of force and whether Christians could become soldiers changed. And the early Christianity of pacifism became a religion of the empire, which realized that sometimes violence was necessary to protect order and peace, or so they claimed. So not only did the early followers of Jesus have these many different views, this variety of views, we also know that they fought with each other about it. They got into arguments. They got into debates about what was right. The early followers of Jesus even called each other names. They had heated theological debates. They argued over what they believed to be the correct interpretations and understandings of who Jesus was and what the church ought to be in the world. If you read some of these early kind of internecine writings where they're arguing with each other, it's quite heated at times. So early Christianity, the early Jesus movement, was not monolithic. It was a diverse movement. And although its adherents understood themselves to be following the way of Jesus in the world, they understood that in different ways. Prior to Christianity becoming the accepted religion in the empire, and prior to it becoming a legal religious practice, there was not an entity within the Christian church that had the authority or the power to force all these different various forms of the Jesus movement to adhere to one set of doctrines over another. So you had all these various ways of understanding, all these various interpretations, and you didn't have the authority within the church yet to enforce one way of thinking about things, one set of doctrines. But then that changed. And it changed when the Emperor Constantine, who legalized Christianity, saw the pragmatic importance for order and peace in the empire of having the church be of one mind. So Constantine, when he decided that Christianity was going to be an accepted legal religion in the empire, saw that there were differences, saw that there were arguments, saw that there were debates, saw that there were divisions within the church. And as a pragmatic emperor, he realized that that was not good for the empire. That was not good for peace and order in the empire. So he wanted the Christian movement to be of one mind, to have one set of accepted official doctrines. So there are many ways to understand who Jesus was and what he did. Just because the Roman Empire under Constantine and subsequent emperors promoted one of those ways for its own benefit doesn't make that the correct understanding. But we do understand why Constantine and those other emperors pushed Christianity in that direction. It's important to understand that the version of Christianity that was codified by the Council of Nicaea in 325 was deeply influenced by Emperor Constantine's desire to maintain and expand his own power. To maintain and expand his own power. He brought bishops from all over the Roman Empire together and said to them, I want you to come to an agreement. I want you to be of one mind about what you think about these things that you have so many different ideas about. I want you to come to agreement. And the reason he wanted them to do this is for peace and order in the empire. And also he realized that the power of the Roman Empire during his time was actually waning. It was decreasing. And Constantine wanted to reverse that. In other words, Constantine wanted to make the Roman Empire great again. Followers of Jesus today need to wrestle with that. They need to wrestle with the reality that the Council of Nicaea that Emperor Constantine called in 325 was more about making the Roman Empire great again than it was about following Jesus. That was more of the purpose. It was in the interest of Constantine and subsequent emperors to create consensus around the least liberative understanding of Jesus. It was in the interest of the empire and the emperor to create consensus around the least liberative understanding of Jesus. You're not going to find in the Council of Nicaea's documents, you're not going to find in the Nicene Creed, and we're going to look at this more the next time I'm with you, you're not going to find an emphasis on action for the poor, action for the oppressed, justice for the most vulnerable in society. You're not going to find an emphasis on the liberative message of Jesus. Rather, you're going to find an emphasis on order, on right belief. And by emphasizing a Jesus primarily to be worshiped, which is what they did at Nicaea, rather than to be followed, and by controlling access to divine favor through an imperially approved church and its sacraments. So the only way that you could gain and have access to divine favor was through the official church and its sacraments. And so if you did not agree with, if you did not submit to the official church and its doctrines, then you could be cut off from the sacraments. You could be cut off from divine favor. And so by doing that, the emperors created the political functional equivalent of the divinity of Caesar. The divinity of Jesus now operates as the functional equivalent to what the divinity of Caesar was prior to the acceptance of Christianity as a legal religion within the empire. And what happens is that Jesus becomes a divinity used to control the behavior of citizens of the empire through the threat of the eternal loss of one's soul. That's a deep threat. That's a big threat. If the church and the empire can threaten the eternal loss of your soul unless you obey and follow the official doctrine of the church, that's a big threat. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of coercion. So followers of Jesus today, I think, need to ask themselves, why did a power-hungry and murderous Emperor Constantine want the official imperial-approved version of Christianity that resulted from the Council of Nicaea? And you might be asking, why am I being so hard on Constantine? Why am I calling him a power-hungry, murderous emperor? Well, we know some things about Constantine. He had his own son executed because he thought his son was having an affair with his son's stepmother. And it turns out that might not have actually been the case, but when Emperor Constantine thought that it might not have been the case, then he decided to execute his wife, the stepmother of the son that he executed. And he basically had her boiled alive in hot baths. There was no trial, just this is what he did. So I'm not exaggerating when I say he was murderous. And I'm not exaggerating when I say he was power hungry, because he started out being co-emperor, and he wrestled power away from the co-emperor, and he was involved in all sorts of uses of violence and coercion to increase and maintain his power. So why should a power-hungry and murderous emperor want the official doctrine that was approved at the Council of Nicaea? What was it that was helpful for him? And I believe that we should have our eyes wide open to the fact that it likely had very little to do with what Jesus actually did and said, and very little to do with who Jesus actually was. So we should refuse, I think, to let Constantine, a man who executed his own son without a trial and boiled his wife alive, to tell people what they should believe about Jesus, so that the church could be of one mind for the maintenance and expansion of Constantine's power for the sake of imperial order. Now, I come from the Protestant tradition. The United Methodist tradition comes from the Protestant tradition through the English Reformation. But the Protestant tradition also has a problem with the imperial influence upon it. Sometimes the Protestants like to say, well, that's not our problem. We protested against the Roman Catholic Church, and we're different. But that's actually not the case, because if you look at the different forms of Protestantism that found widespread acceptance, they were the forms that were supportive of political leaders who were seeking political and economic independence from the Roman Catholic Church. So with Lutheranism, you see the German princes who were very supportive of Luther's theology because it gave them some theological cover to become more independent from Rome. You see in England, with the King of England, the desire to have theological cover to become more independent from Rome. It had something to do with wanting to get another divorce, but that wasn't what it was all about. It was about having more sovereignty, more independence from Rome. And so the forms of Protestantism that were conducive to the maintenance of power of these political leaders, those were the forms that actually got widespread acceptance. The ones that didn't do that, the ones that embraced pacifism or resistance to previously accepted views about the power of the state, we know what happened to those forms of Protestantism. They were brutally dealt with. They were brutally suppressed. Protestant empires, as well as Catholic empires, as well as Orthodox empires, have used Christianity for their maintenance and expansion of their power. And all forms of Christianity have seen this happen. And we see it now today as well. We see it here in our society. We see such a movement of Christianity being used by political power to maintain and expand it. Here in the United States, it's typically found primarily within what we call evangelical Protestant Christianity, though it also has allies among some other autocratic movements within Christianity. Similar to the Constantinian appropriation of the Jesus movement for imperial purposes, the current push that we see here in the United States for a theocratic authoritarianism that we are experiencing has almost nothing to do with God or Jesus, and almost everything to do with an unholy alliance to maintain and expand a certain form of political, economic, and cultural hegemony. And followers of Jesus must wrestle with this fact, I think, that the co-opting of Christianity for the purpose of making America great again is not a new phenomenon. Empires have been co-opting Christianity for the purpose of making them great since the Edict of Milan in 313, when Constantine made Christianity a legal and accepted religion in the empire. And this has very little to do with who Jesus was, what he did, or what followers of Jesus ought to be doing in the world today.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
So I promised that I wasn't intending to skip the giving portion of our service. I thought there was going to be a video message after the discourse today. So make sure that those who wish may bring their gifts to the table, or you may also donate at the Donate tab on the church mobile app, so you can give before leaving today. Our parting thought comes from another colleague of mine, Robin Myers, who is the retired minister of Mayflower UCC Church in Oklahoma City, and also is a professor at Oklahoma City University. One of his many, many books is titled The Underground Church, Reclaiming the Subversive Way of Jesus, and these parting thoughts come from that book. Robin writes, "The underground church will seek to work together with all others who share the conviction that it is more important to be loving than to be right. It is more important to be loving than to be right. We will not insist that others agree with us on all matters theological, only that we offer each other the benefit of the doubt, mutual respect, and the chance to become the rarest and most precious of all things, a community that declares its loyalty only to love and justice, not to Caesar." Let us stand in body or spirit for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.